Donald Trump has been using the emergency docket to pressure the United States Supreme Court and stampede them into making decisions they're not ready for since the beginning of this administration. It's an obvious, orchestrated attack on the United States Supreme Court. Is it working? Sometimes yes, and sometimes no. Donald Trump's on an epic losing streak at the United States Supreme Court right now, 3-0. But those emergency applications on a very scant record, without oral argument, without time for deliberation, they're getting in the way of the day-to-day business of the court. And we're waiting on 30 or 40 rulings, real 40, 50, 100-page decisions, opinions of the United States Supreme Court with the dissents and the concurrences and all of that. And they're delayed. We should have had them already, almost all of them. We're already almost here in June. But we may not get them all until July or August because of how backdated and backlogged the court is. We break it all down for you here on Legal AF on a show we call Unprecedented. And here's a clip. So why don't we, rather than, keep gilding the lily about that case, why don't we move on to the new filings and have you lead the audience on that about the DOGE access to Social Security. This is not the case yet, I don't believe, that came out of San Francisco in which, all federal restructuring has been stopped as a result of DOGE. That one is on a fast track to the Ninth Circuit, and it'll get to the Supreme Court maybe with an emergency petition. This is about, not to get fatigued here, but this is about DOGE access to Social Security. Why don't you walk the audience through that?
So this one's out of the Fourth Circuit. And what's at issue is the lower court or the circuit basically paused. They said that DOGE cannot access the Social Security information of people unless it was anonymous information that they could get. And let me say like the exact quote, but it was basically like, the court said they could receive the information, but only if it was like in an anonymous setting. They can't get the person's name with their Social Security, with their medical information. They can get the data, but not if you can like piece together who it is they're talking about. It's very reasonable, right? But that wasn't good enough for the government. And so they went in and they're asking the Supreme Court in an emergency appeal yet again to basically undo that pause and allow them to go in and get that data. And so we just had the filing of the response from the plaintiff who brought this initial suit. The AFL-CIO brought the suit to begin with, and they just filed their response to the Supreme Court and really pointing out there is no emergency. You should not take this because, again, we're not looking at the substance here. The government isn't asking to look at the substance. They're asking the Supreme Court to intervene and overturn the lower court's decision to put a pause on the access of information until the litigation proceeds. And that was really, I thought, the crux of what was saying. There is no emergency, so you can't take it, or you shouldn't take it, basically. That this is, the government has only devoted like a paragraph to why this is an emergency. It's clearly not. This is such serious information. And I thought it was really interesting because they said, on the Social Security's website, they advertise that it is the highest, quote, the highest level of privacy protection available, end quote. That's what the Social Security Administration advertised about, your privacy. And now they are giving it to DOGE in violation of the Privacy Act that basically says, like, you only get this information if, like, you absolutely have to, and you have to go to procedures. So in the brief they filed with the Supreme Court, they quoted that. My lawyer self also thought this is going to be a class action lawsuit at one point, right? I mean, talk about, false advertising. I think this would be a great false advertising class action. But the bottom line, they used Social Security Administration's own word against them, saying, this is, you said it was protected. Let's let this litigation proceed. Supreme Court, don't intervene. This isn't an emergency. That's essentially, so we'll see what happens. But that's the latest on that.
Okay. Yeah, we'll follow that. Again, there'll be no oral argument. This will be off of these emergency petitions. I just saw something interesting in SCOTUS blog, that because there are just so many emergency petitions, because this is Donald Trump's chosen method, he thinks it's a loophole to try to stampede and force the Supreme Court to rule for him more than not, which has not been working, at least in immigration and deportation. He's on a massive losing streak of 3 major cases in a row, effectively. but he keeps trying. He gets an A for effort, I guess. But that is delaying the court's other business, which is, they heard 70 cases this year or so, and they've got to issue decisions in all of them. And they've only issued decisions, I think, in 30 or 30, like 40. So they got 30 opinions that run 30 to 40 to 50 to 100 pages in length that they haven't completed yet. They have to write it. It's not just one person. They have to write it. Who's ever been assigned to write the opinion, who's ever in the majority vote, gets assigned by the Chief Justice. If he's in the majority, sometimes he takes the prerogative and writes it himself. And he, primarily the law clerks, write the first drafts of the opinion, revised by the justice. It then gets circulated to see who's in agreement, or if things should be changed, or people are going to do what's called concurrences, or they're going to agree in part and dissent in part. And that's why in some cases you get one opinion, and in some cases you get every justice issues their own opinion. I concur with the first three parts, but not the last part. I dissent from this, and it's just a mess. Then you and I got to do, well, it looks like there's a 6-3 about this issue, and 7-2 on this issue, and 5-4 on this issue in the same case. So that whole process takes a minute. And then the law clerks running around when they're not leaving it by accident on the copier so that it leaks out. They're running around with their drafts, between pizza bites and then, okay, we got it final, and let's go to the printer. And it takes a minute. And that's being delayed. We normally would have, like when the leak of Dobbs happened about ripping away a woman's right to choose. The leak of the draft was March. The opinion came out, I think, in June or May or June. So even in draft, it took a couple of months to come out. We're already in May, and they're talking about opinions normally that would come out by the end of May so they can go on their holiday by June, because they like to be out the door while opinions are dropping. They're talking about opinions not dropping until July, maybe August. Wow. They come back into session in October. So this is one of the latest, if not the, you and I will have a lot to talk about this summer. Normally after June, by July, you and I are talking about, well, next term, here's the interesting cases on the docket. F that. This is going to be, here's 5 new opinions all got dropped today. Let's talk about them. And on top of that, more emergency applications, because they're not stopping. They're unabated. I only have jokes. Supreme Court's better stay close to town. Like, don't go to Europe, because they're going to have to do a lot of work.
That's going to make them grumpy.
Yeah, well, I don't know how
no, but I do think Trump, and we're going to go into this, Trump and Stephen Miller, and just the justices are starting to talk more about them. And everything he does like this, like filing these emergency dockets and interfering with their summer vacation. Hey, they're human. They're human people, just like everyone else. That's going to make them grumpy.
They are human people. Welcome back. Dina, Dahl, and me get together once a week, and we kibitz about the United States Supreme Court the only way we know how, without blowing smoke or sunshine. You don't want to miss it. Subscribe here. It's for free. Set reminders. They're for free. And then come on over to all the other ways to support Legal AF. Legal AF, the Substack, where we post actual court filings, documents, and recordings and all of that up on the Substack. I do a morning briefing called Morning AF. We post filings from the court we call Filings AF. Are you getting the message? Are you getting the picture? I'm glad you're here. I'm Michael Popok. Until my next report. Can't get your fill of Legal AF? Me neither. That's why we formed the Legal AF Substack. Every time we mention something in a hot take, whether it's a court filing or a oral argument, come over to the Substack. You'll find the court filing and the oral argument there, including a daily roundup that I do called, wait for it, Morning AF. What else? All the other contributors from Legal AF are there as well. We got some new reporting. We got interviews. We got ad-free versions of the podcast and hot takes. Where? Legal AF on Substack. Come over now to free subscribe.